This is Heroine Addiction, presented by That Time I Got Reincarnated in the Same World as an Anime Podcaster, where we cover romance and drama manhwa, and it's not bad to destroy people if they were mean to you in your past life. I'm Isekai Sensei-Sama, aka Brad, and as always I'm joined by Bento Baggins, aka Ben.
Hello.
Be sure to find us on social media, which you can also find links for on our website, animepodcasterreincarnation.com. So today we're covering The Villainess is a Marionette. And as always, I will read the summary, and then we'll jump into the discussion. I woke up as Kiana Hill, the novel's villainess, praised as the greatest beauty in the Empire. Who knew that her story would catch my attention because I was her in my past life? Destined for terrible ends, I've died twice, but I refuse to die a third time as a pawn in someone else's scheme. I'm no longer the vain and naive princess. Now that I know how the story will unfold, I'll turn the tables and have everyone dancing to my tune. This time, I'll be the one pulling the strings. So yeah, this is a really interesting series. I was reading this for a long time. I started it fairly early. And this was one of the ones that I put on the recommendation list, like, to start off. I thought there was all of the different little points that would, make this interesting. And, there's like some political stuff and there's some romance and all the different little pieces that go into it to make a really good manhwa. And it's actually pretty highly rated. I see here, on Bato it's rated at 8.7, which is fairly high. But I have a feeling that I know why it's rated that high.
Okay.
And I bet you can guess.
Maybe. So I know Kermit is usually like the song guy. But for this occasion, I wanted to try my hand at it.
Oh my God. Okay.
We've been so positive about everything. I've enjoyed all of the Otome Isekai so much that this time it was just, I didn't like this comic. It isn't very good. And if you could put like a little beat under that, maybe do a trap remix.
I'm not going to do that.
And then that can be our one for the ones we don't like. I don't know why it's so highly rated. Like, I'll tell you, if I'd come to it maybe a little earlier in the journey before I'd read some other stuff, I'd have liked it more. But like the Villainess is a Marionette, like you could have just called it The Villainess is an Otome Isekai protagonist. There's just not, and I don't want to be too harsh on people who like it, because I don't think anybody's wrong to like it or anything. It's not incompetent or anything like that. It's probably going to score just fine on a lot of the rubric stuff that talks about like writing quality, art quality, stuff like that. But the story choices just seemed so like deviant art to me. Having read a lot of Otome Isekai now, it seemed like an Otome Isekai written by somebody whose life experience consisted of Otome Isekais. Like it seemed like just a young person wrote it, maybe. In that, like you could tell like there were the plot points that they decided on, and then they just move from plot point to plot point, and the characters don't feel like people. I think that was the main problem, is like I didn't connect to anyone the way I usually do.
So you said something interesting there that made me think of something. So this is written by I'm probably going to butcher this. Hanirim, Hanirim. And I was like, oh, I wonder if they do anything else. So I looked this up. There's let's see, there's 3 here. One of the other ones is another series that I read. It's called Can We Become Family, which is also pretty highly rated, but I have to laugh when I see that, because one of the really interesting things about this other series, Can We Become Family, is the fact that like it's 85 chapters in and almost nothing has happened. Mm-hmm. and when I saw that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Okay, written by the same person.
Like in this one, things are happening. I can't accuse it of that. Like, it has all of the characteristics of a good otome isekai. Like the protagonist is beautiful, the male lead is handsome. There's soap opera drama, there's political intrigue. It's like you said, she does the thing where she's reincarnated and need to get my independence, got to get some political power, got to get a business going, got to get it hits all the beats, but you don't learn anything about her really. Like I don't have a good read on who she is. Like she constantly changes her personality based on who she's talking to.
Yeah.
When she's talking to the quasi-incestuous brother, she's a Cersei Lannister playing a weird game. She's almost like flirting with him and encouraging him, even though he's like really dark. But then when she's with the germaphobe guy, she's cute and kind and compassionate and worried about how is he comfortable with touching and all that stuff. And when she's with the ladies in waiting, she's the cunning villainess who masterminds like their ouster and all that stuff. And it's like she's 3 different otome isekai protagonists depending on who she's talking to.
Yeah.
And then the characters I like the most, the ones I kind of started connecting with were like I think Vera, the lady in waiting, or Vera. She was the
Vera
one,
Lexton.
Yeah, who survived the ouster, the initial ouster of all the ladies in waiting. Mm. I kind of like the germaphobe guy, Raffaello
Kidry. Duke Kidry.
I like Olivia, who was, I guess, the original protagonist of the novel.
Yeah, Olivia Grace.
And I, like, this is the first one where I have gotten lost in a side ship, I guess, because if any 2 characters should get together in this one, it is actually Raffaello and Olivia. Like, I don't like the protagonist at all. And it's not even that I don't like her. I don't know who she is. When I'm supposed to like her, I do. But then there's all these scenes they have that undermine that, where it makes me wonder, like, what the hell are you doing?
So we should probably get this out of the way. So you read up until the end of the first season, and then you skimmed the second season.
Yes.
So there is a point, and I can't remember exactly where it is, but I think it's in the second season. It might be near the beginning of the second season, where she goes and meets with her other brother, who is like from a different
the young
mother.
Like bastard son.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Edel,
I remember that.
Edel, she visits him at the academy and tries to connect with him. I would say her real personality is who she is with him. I think that's as close as we get to this is who she actually is.
But I don't even understand what her, like, now maybe this is where the skimming hurts me, is because I remember that interaction. I remember he was in a fight with like 5 other boys. The headmaster was going to take their side. She saved him from bullying, basically. But she did that with an agenda. And so is she kind? Is she cunning? Is it a little of both? And
I think there's multiple levels to it. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's like she's supposed to be a little bit. She's supposed to be cool, and I think that's the downfall of the thing is like it's like all the characters have to, like she especially has to be cool at all costs. If it would be cool in the scene for a seductress to be played, she will play a seductress. If it would be cool in the scene, but she doesn't, like, even though one person can't be all of those things, and I think that's where I say like the DeviantArt OC of it all is she's too much. She's too much to too many things. Mm. And she's got the blindness about the guy likes me, and then but she's also like, I'm gonna be real with you. I don't. The brother stuff was very uncomfortable. I don't know what the hell that is. She has a brother, and I think this is her full brother, right? He's not a half brother, yeah. And Regef is supposedly the crown prince. Mm-hmm. There's 2 potential candidates, I guess. The emperor's sick, but still in the picture
for now.
And the brother doesn't seem to have the approval of the emperor. He's also like, literally, he's Joffrey from Game of Thrones. He's a sociopathic monster who I don't know that he wants to like have sex with his sister, but he wants to possess her at the very least. And there's a lot of that in this story. There's a lot of people that don't. It's not just that they want to. They want a relationship with her. They want to sleep with her. They want to own her. And it's weird how often that keeps coming up.
Yeah.
So that, and that's one where it's like, I don't know. I know there's a lot of problematic stuff in every Otome Isekai, but that one started to make me uncomfortable because, like, I don't know. I'm not a person who I think has a lot of like content warnings, and I don't think it like triggered a trauma response in me or anything. But it's just like, yeah, I don't want to see this. I don't know. The creepy guy, like, I don't mind when it's the villain, I guess. Like her previous life's husband was an abusive, obsessive, possessive guy who, eventually kills her. But he's the bad guy. I don't remember exactly what happened in her first life. In
the first chapter, she is killed by someone out on the street with a knife. Or rather, the pre-chapter or whatever. Chapter 0.
Okay, so this is something we got to talk about. You tell me how common this is. Because this made me laugh. And maybe it wasn't supposed to. She is both a transmigrator or like a rewinder, whatever you call that, a regressor. And she's a transmigrator. So she is both transported into a novel, but also, so she lived a full life, the life of the princess in the novel. Then she died. Then she was reincarnated into a Korean woman in the modern day. Then she was stabbed on the street. Then she was reincarnated again into her adult body as the princess.
So for some reason, this sort of like double isekai thing has become a trend, and lots of series are doing it. Now, most of the time, it's a reveal that happens near the very end that they go, oh, actually, she was this person originally all along, and she went through the original story, and the exact same beat. She went through the original story, died, goes into modern day Korea, finds her life as a book. She doesn't remember that she was that person before. She finds her life as a web novel or whatever, reads it, she gets really into it, she finds all of the story beats and everything, and then she dies and gets reincarnated there, and so she thinks, oh, I got reincarnated into this story I like. But no, secretly she was that person the whole time.
You ever read Tower of Terror by R.L. Stine of the Goosebumps series?
No.
Where the kids are going through a London, the Tower of London tour, and everything seems really familiar to them, and it turns out they were actually from the olden times, but they were sent forward in time by a spell because they were princes and princesses, and they were going to get... It's not the worst idea in the world.
But did they then go back to
They do go back, yeah. Yeah, they go back.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, that's the end.
Then that's it, yeah.
Spoilers for Tower of Terror.
Well, maybe that was written in the 90s, right? Maybe that's where they all got it from.
Maybe that's... Was Goosebumps big in South Korea? Look, it's not the worst idea. I get the I get how that would be emotionally satisfying to... I think it would work especially well if you showed more of the life in Korea. Like, the ones where they show the person dealing with a bunch of stuff in the modern day and escaping into that novel and connecting with that novel for some reason, and then they find out that's where they belonged. That's an emotionally satisfying story beat.
I think there's ways to do it well, and I don't remember in the full story of the Villainess as a Marionette where she comes to that realization, but they spoil it in the chapter 0. And so the point of that trope is that it needs to be a surprise. Like, the whole point is that, like, the protagonist needs to sort of figure it out later on to go, oh, I don't want to go back to Korea because this is where I'm supposed to be. Like, I've changed my life. I have these people that I love now. It hasn't turned into a tragedy like it was in the past. Like, I was given another chance. That needs to be an emotional moment that you build up to.
Yeah.
With, like, there's character growth involved and everything. And so there's quite a few series that do that properly, and it works, and it's good. And you could have done that here, but again, like, they spoiled it immediately, and it's like, you've just taken away a plot thread that you could have sewn in later that would have, like, held a lot of this together.
Well, I'm kind of interested. Is there... Because everything... I don't know the years these things were published. I don't know what influenced what. Is there anything... like any plot point, anything about this story that you haven't seen in any other story?
No. So, and that's... I don't dislike this series, by the way. I don't know if I said that already. It's one that I put on the recommendation list. I do enjoy it. But I will say that it does all of the things. Like, all of the tropes of Otome Isekai that you are familiar with, it's doing all of them. And not necessarily well. I think the main issue that I have with it is that it sort of is like taking all of those little plot points and just stretching them out so far that it's like you're establishing things way too late in the story and stuff. The biggest one that struck me was we go through the whole first season and like half of the second season, And then all of a sudden we introduce magic into the series.
Oh
It's
my
like,
god, that was like, yeah.
we haven't had any magic up until now. If we did, it was, very little. It wasn't plot relevant. And then all of a sudden she's like, I'm going to become magical. I'm going to the Magic Tower Master and I'm going to have him perform a ritual. And now I have all these overpowered magical abilities. And I'm going to be able to do all this stuff because now the reason she did that makes sense because she was trying to gain all this political power, and as she went on, she found that, like, oh, she can't break through this barrier of a lot of these sort of machinations that are going on because she doesn't have any physical power, which all of these men around her do. And so she has to get something that can give her an edge there. And that makes sense. But because you haven't established anything leading up to that, and there's no, like, system of magic that is based on genealogy or anything like that. It's literally, they're just like, we're going to perform a ceremony. You need to sacrifice part of your life to get mad. And it's just like out of the blue.
The plot would have worked just as well if they'd given her a gun.
Well, they did at that one.
I mean, that's the thing.
And she immediately got rid of it. It's like,
yeah. It's tough because it's not like bad. Nothing about it is I don't want to say
it's very rote, but not in the way that you want it to be.
Like each piece of this by itself would work in another story.
Yeah.
The brother thing, much as I'm not here for it, could work in another story. Like a story that's uniformly dark. The germaphobe guy could work. The thing with the maids and the chef and that's all standard stuff. And it's a fine way to show her getting power over the household. I think like the plots and schemes, they're well crafted, they make sense, they're plausible. It's just I don't know her. She because she's doing everything, because she's all over the place. She's in like a dark story and a love story and a comedy story and a magic adventure story, and I mean, you can't. It feels like a kid playing with their action figures or dolls.
That makes me wonder if they're like, maybe we're judging this too soon, because maybe the whole point that the author is going for is that she's going to get to a point and go, who am I? I've been doing all this stuff. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know which is the real me. Like, maybe that's going to be the point, is that she has to figure out, like,
maybe
which one of these faces that she puts on is the real person, or is there even a real person underneath that mask?
That would be an interesting way to wrap it up. I don't think I would ever on my own have made it to that point.
Yeah.
Like, this is one I probably wouldn't even have really made it far enough in to bother rating at all. And I kind of wonder, I've had this theory and I've mentioned it before when it comes to books. A lot of books tend to stay above like a 3.5 rating on most sites, no matter how bad they are. And it's partly because people don't buy and read books they don't like. There's a heavy bias towards buying something you're going to like when you're committing to the 8 to 10 hour journey of reading a book. And
if they really don't like it, they're going to put it down and not think about it anymore. They're not going to go out of their way and be like, I need to rate this and let everyone know how terrible it is.
Yeah, there's certain products in the world that skew low rating because people are only going to rate them if they have a problem with it. Like, if I buy a computer and it doesn't work, I'll rate that. If I buy a computer and it works, I'll forget I bought it. But so maybe there's something there with the Otome Isekai thing. skews towards people who gave it their time.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably wouldn't have. I'd probably have put this down at chapter 20, I think.
That I think that's probably fair, and I think maybe part of what's going on here, and I'm getting this sense more and more as we're talking about it. I think this is really, really geared to a specific audience, that being teenage girls.
I was I was describing this to somebody as I was reading it, and I was like, it just really started to fall off its own edge. And I come back to the brother thing because that's where I started to be like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, yes, I found it not offensive, but off-putting, and I think I was supposed to. I don't think the author thinks the brother is a good guy, though I don't know. I was reading the Bento comments, okay? And that's a mistake, I know. But the Bento comments are all like, I like that that she recognizes that the brother is redeemable and that he is the way he is because of his abuse. And I was like, yeah, a different message. I got something else out of that.
I mean, if that's going to happen, they've been waiting a long time. At the end of the last chapter of season 2, he's going to kill a little monk boy because she's not there at the monastery, which when he goes to see her like that.
I thought the way he was portrayed, this was my reading of it, is he's obviously a sociopath.
Yeah.
She's afraid of him. And so she's manipulating him. But she tells him she plans to make him the emperor. And I believe her. I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think,
alert.
Yeah,
she's going to become
the empress.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think when she said that, she believed it. I think she intended to make him the emperor. It's the old Otome Isekai chestnut of I just want to go live in the country by a beach and
I think there's a point where she's thinking, I'll make him emperor, but if I can keep control of him, I can do whatever I want.
Which he's a monster. I mean, like when she's like placating him, and because it's all mixed in with like, oh, I feel so genuinely bad for him because he's like this because of the abuse our parents heaped on us. And it's like, well, you weren't like that. I mean, even at your worst, you were just annoying. That was so you weren't like killing people. And
well, we didn't get a deep dive into what she was like in the original timeline, because I think there was a lot of stuff going on there where she was going against, Olivia and doing some pretty bad stuff.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe this is another one where I like, what was it? Villainess turns the hourglass with Mael.
Yeah.
I had more sympathy for Mael because like she was dumb and she was getting bad advice. And that story just really wanted to continue kicking her no matter what.
I mean, I said at the beginning, you can destroy people as long as they were mean to you and you pass.
Yep. It's but yeah, I don't like the brother at all. And I honestly don't know if I'm supposed to.
I think there was a point early on where it was supposed to be ambiguous, but as we've gotten further into the story, it's becoming more and more. And I think this is what is sort of leading up to her at the end of the second season going, I'm going to become the Empress, in that you're sort of coming to the realization that he's irredeemable, which I want to say, like, I'm pretty sure there's no cure for sociopathy. Like, I think people can be turned into sociopaths, but I think once that happens, you're sort of like, there's no going back.
I mean, there's like therapies. You know, they say a lot of psychopathic, sociopathic people tend to gravitate towards like leadership positions in companies and stuff like that. They're not killing people, I hope.
Well, not with their own hands.
Yeah, the brother thing, the way she handled him, that was probably something that was going to put me off. And so, like, if it's a big thing in the book community as well to rate something you haven't finished, that's controversial. And I think there's a lot of good arguments.
We would never do that.
Well, we've always been pretty generous with the ratings. Like, I'd say everything we've rated has been 7, 8 out of 10 or above.
We had ones. I didn't go back and do the ratings yet. I will.
But I think the only one I haven't personally liked so far was the webcomic one we talked about.
Yeah, Isekai Maid Forming a Union.
Yeah. But even then, I think I understand why people like it, and I think it just wasn't for me. This one, I'm leaning towards a not recommend, but for me, and this is what I would say to anyone who's listening to this and basing whether or not they read it on it, is nothing they can do in the future is going to make me change my mind about what I read for the first probably 60 chapters.
I think there's definitely something to be said about, like, you have to, even if you have a story where, like, the ending is just this big, amazing thing and it wraps up all of the plot points and you've got these twists and, like, it's so satisfying and everything, you have to have something at the beginning to make it worthwhile to get there. And it sounds like, from what you're saying, like, there was none of that for you.
What I would need is a connection to the main character. And I could see it being, I'm just not in the headspace to jive with this character. But I also think she's like wildly inconsistent. So I don't know who would be in the headspace to jive with her other than other people who just want to write the coolest otome isekai you could possibly write.
I think there's probably plenty of young women, teenage girls, who are in situations where they feel like they are being taken advantage of all the time, and they aren't allowed to be their own person, and, you know, they hate this situation. They're looking for escapism. I think this story probably would speak to them in a lot of different ways. And the fact that you don't really get to know Kayana means that she can also work as a self-insert.
Yeah.
To say, oh, I'm just like Kayana. And if I had any kind of power at all, I could do these things that she's doing. And then you get to the second season, and then you find out, oh, I can't actually get magic powers and, like, make things fly around the room. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but...
Well, I'll tell you the other thing that's happening for me too is it's a little bit of like critic syndrome, where I read an otome isekai minimum one a month, you know, and I have seen all of these tropes before.
Mm.
If I hadn't, I'd probably have a much nicer opinion of it. If I had seen these things for the first time in this comic, if this had been the first otome isekai we read, not the 15th, I probably would have been like, wow, that's really neat. Because, like, it does many of the tropes of the genre well enough that I don't think it would turn somebody off from the genre. It does sort of show what Otome Isekai is capable of. It's just when you've had some of these really good ones, it's like, oh, well, I think this is just, I could see, like, this is an imitation of this. This came from this story. This, because it's a very, like, I don't mean this in a negative way at all. It's a very mimetic genre.
Yeah.
Where the stories are very, very similar with a few key changes in the DNA. And over time, the whole genre sort of just evolves into a different kind of story. Or a couple of different kind of stories.
I think the thing that's missing, like, I mean, you hit on this already, that you're not actually getting to know Kayena. You're not getting to know the protagonist in a meaningful way. And I think what other series that are better than this do, even though they are doing all of the tropes to a similar or sometimes even worse than this series, is that you are connecting with those characters on a much deeper level. And there is actual characterization and not, look at it from this side, look at it from the other side. Who is this person when they're talking to anyone in particular? Like, you have to have those characters that grow and evolve and you attach to. And even if you do every single trope that the fans of the genre want, and you do it so well, if you don't have those normal story things that, like, make a good story, it's still going to fall flat.
Well, and there's so many points where, like, a specific one is where they're ousting the chef. You find out that the Imperial Palace chef has been embezzling funds. He's claiming to order a bunch of fancy ingredients, but he's actually ordering a tenth of what he says and pocketing the rest of the money. Two of her ladies in waiting find out about or suspect this, and they go looking for proof, and they get caught, and she sweeps in to save them and expose the chef because she knew about it all along because she read the novel. She's barely in that. The protagonist is not even really there for a couple of chapters. We don't know what's in her head. And the story is told from the perspective of Vera. I don't know how to say her name. And so I start to connect with Vera, and that's fine because she is an important side character, and it's okay to change perspectives from time to time. But I think the reason we changed perspectives wasn't so much to highlight Vera and Olivia. It was so that the protagonist could sweep in and be cool. Like, they're about to go down. They're about to get punished for breaking into the kitchen. And all of a sudden, Kayena's right there, master of the situation, telling everybody what's up. Turn over that box. Oh, it's filled with rocks. You're going to jail. And she's just so cool. And that's where I'm like, it feels like a young person wrote it, because it does make Kayena look cool, but Kayena's purpose isn't, like, from a storytelling perspective, Kayena's purpose is not to be cool. Kayena's purpose is to be sympathetic. And if I could just get a little of her inner monologue, it undermines her coolness. And we do get a little. She says something like, "Oh, I didn't expect them to do this early," and it's supposed to be a moment where her ladies in waiting actually like her, and they're trying to protect her, and they're putting their own necks on the line for her. but then she handles it in the exact same tone with which she handles the brother. And I'm like, do you care about anybody? And most Otome Isekai protagonists, they start off not caring about anybody, either because they're characters in a novel and we haven't realized they're real people yet, or because they're just pawns in my game. I'm so preoccupied with my own safety that I can't afford to worry about anybody else. And then they slowly come to realize that they do care. And I suspect the same beats will play out in this one because I know what it's copying. But it's got too much of the cool and not enough of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
I keep making that point in different ways. I'm just probably showing examples, but
no, I think you're right, because like there's a lot of the sort of culmination of any particular plot thread that we're following down seems to just be sort of like figuring out what the cool situation is at the end and then setting things up to get there without like thinking about what is the particular characterization that would allow these events to occur, and like what are we gonna learn about our protagonist and her relationships with these people and stuff like that. So I mean, I think overall your assessment of this is pretty fair. I think maybe the thing that we haven't touched on that really explains the popularity of this, beyond the fact that I think, you know, the target audience probably has, different literary needs than us, is the fact that this is just a ridiculously pretty series.
yes, I will give it that. The artist is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. I will say there was one scene that made me laugh out loud. I almost put it in the Discord, but I didn't want to give away too much of what I was going to be talking about. There's one where what's his name? The germaphobe, Raffaello. He's sitting there thinking at his desk with his aides around him. And there's a zoom in panel, and I realized his shirt's just open. He's just sitting there with his chest out. And I'm like, yep, that's how the nobles did it back then. They sat at their fancy desk, just relaxing with the boys, nips out.
Have you seen the male boob window yet?
The male boob window?
Yeah, it's a really popular thing in Otome Isekai.
I've seen a lot of male boob.
So
I don't know the window.
There's all these different series where like the normal thing that these men wear is a shirt that's got like a diamond cut out right in the center of the chest.
like the Giorno Giovanna.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah. No, I've seen that. No, look, nothing wrong with a little male cleavage. I get why you like it. Hey, I'm tempted to like it myself. But no, he's hot. I'll give him that. He's hot. She's not. This is one where it's like, I don't know what this reveals about me. I suspect it reveals something about me. I go for the pink hair, not the blonde hair. I'm not a fan of the blondes. Also, like, this was another thing I didn't quite love was, and I know they're setting up for the magic later on, when she's talking about how like all these dudes are going to possess, torture, kill, presumably sexually assault her. They're also juxtaposing that with, she's so frail. She's shivering. She's so small. How can this small woman be so powerful? And it's like, it was just like, is this someone's fetish? Is that what this is?
Well, yeah.
Is this like a sub thing? Is this like...
If you ever have to ask, is this someone's fetish? The answer is yes. Like,
Yeah. Well, that's what I wonder is like, are we setting up for the magic or are we indulging in a little submission fetish
Porque no
or
las dos.
sadism fetish, depending on where you land in this? Yeah, I didn't. Some of that stuff was like, that is not what I would choose to read for myself. It's not. I'll say this: I'm making a bigger deal of it than it is in the comic itself. They move on from that pretty quickly. It doesn't dwell there, but I think it does want to tease it. Like it wants to tease the incest. It wants to tease the sadism angle. It wants to tease a
Yeah.
couple of these things, and it's like I see. I wouldn't even entertain that if I was writing. We all know my Oshinoko troubles. Arguing with Whitlash in the Discord. It's not a harem. It's a love triangle. I refuse. But yeah, I don't know. Do you want to bust out the rubric because we usually have a pretty long conversation?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. Yeah, let's do the rubric and yeah, let's see how close to 8.7 we can get.
I don't think it's gonna be low, but I don't think it's gonna be one of my higher.
I have a feeling that this will probably be one of the lower ones. I think I'm going to rate it probably. I think this is going to be our biggest spread because there's points here where I am into this stuff, even though objectively there's issues with it. So I think you're probably going to have a more objective number than I will, but let's see where we get.
I'll have the socially acceptable number, and you'll have the degenerate number.
Well, we're going to start off with content and ideas, as always. Despite the conversations that we just had, I'm going to go with a 4 here. So I know we said a lot of this, like, oh, you're not getting her characterization and all that kind of stuff. But I think even though I'm not really satisfied with sort of the arcs and plots and everything that go through this, I do think there's a lot of ways that it presents them clearly and it works through them and you get to a resolution. This would probably be one where it would be better to have a 3.5, but I'm leaning towards a 4 because I think that it is satisfying in a lot of ways, even if it is missing a lot of the sort of good literary, cornerstones that you want from like a really good series.
I'm at a 3. I don't think it's very original. And like I said, Otome Isekai is this highly mimetic genre where there are very, very similar plot points in almost all of them. And so originality is relative here, but most Otome Isekai have a thing I can point to where I'm like, this is the one with the hourglass. This is the one where she wrote the book. This is the one. If I had to point to this one and say what makes it different from every other Otome Isekai, I would say this is the one I didn't like. I don't really know how to differentiate this from everything else other than it does everything. Like, I don't know what her thing is.
Yeah. And I think there's two sides to this because on the one hand, I want to say like, oh, we shouldn't docket points for doing the things that other series are doing because those series are doing it too. But on the other hand, the fact that it's not necessarily doing them as well as any of the other ones. I think it's a fair assessment.
I don't think this is a toughie because I don't think it's like I'm giving it a 3. I don't think it's done the content or ideas really badly. I just think like you can read, assume you're not you. You can only read one Otome Isekai. Give me a quick pitch for why it should be this one. and
because it does everything.
Yeah, because it does everything.
You get it all.
There you go. Yeah, that's fair. I think that's where I'm coming from. Compared to every other Otome Isekai, I just think it's I don't want to say it's copying because I think the rules of this genre are different than other genres. Like in a lot of other genres, the closeness of all these stories would be considered copying. But in this genre, it's understood that that's what we're doing, and we're putting a spin on it.
Because
that's how I've always
want.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it. And this, I just felt like this didn't put a spin on it. It's just a competent entry into the Otome Isekai genre, and it doesn't really do much to differentiate itself.
Yeah. All right. So, moving on to pacing and structure. I'm waffling on this one. I'm between a 3 and a 4 here. I'm not really sure if the pacing is slow enough at times that I would give it a 3. I'm leaning towards a 3, and part of that is because of the other series that this author wrote, which I mentioned before, which the pacing in that one I would give a 2 because it is so friggin' slow. But I feel like this series is much more forgiving of it because it seems that even though overall things aren't happening that fast, it does have individual things that are happening. And the other series does not. Like, it's just stretching stuff. It's like, we've been walking around this house for 15 chapters now. When is something going to happen? So why don't you tell me where you're at, and then I'll decide.
Yeah, I was leaning towards a 3, but I think you're right. I think when I say I don't like the pacing, really what I'm missing is I want an answer about who she is, and I feel like that is taking too long to be introduced. And that's more of a content problem than a pacing problem. Because you're right. The story is moving forward. The story of her ascension to Empress, the romance is moving along at about the pace you would expect. So I think I can see my way to a 4.
All right. I'll match that then. Because I think part of what I was getting to was I was attaching to that other series too much. And I was going like, oh, it's the same author and maybe those problems are present here as well. But I think this is doing enough that I can give it a 4 without, much of a stretch. All right. Characters. So...
Are you not using the romance rubric?
Oh yeah, I wanted to discuss that. So, as I was, re-skimming this before we talked about it, I was thinking like, oh, I think this is we finally need to break out the romance rubric. But then I sort of got to a point where I was like, you know what? I don't know that there's enough romance in here that I can actually do that, because there is obviously romance. There is overtly romance between Kayana and Raffaello. There's no question about that. They're not like beating around the bush or anything. However, I feel like it's less than like 10% of what is going on.
I'd be interested to know. Let us know if you think this should be romance or not. But I'm fine going with just characters.
Yeah. On that note, for characters, I'm gonna give this a 3. This will be my first 3. I don't feel like you get characterizations, you get some arcs, you get some growth and all that, but none of it is really going into any depth. And I feel like the majority of what happens is just set pieces. It's like you mentioned before, we're going to set up this situation so that Kayana can look cool. And within that, you get to know some of the other characters. You talk to Olivia and the other maids. You sort of get this weird perspective from the brother where he's like sort of going back and forth between like, oh, I'm going to be a sociopath versus, oh, maybe I actually want to do what's good for everybody. You get some interactions with the Emperor that are leaning towards like, oh, maybe he actually wanted to be a father and he didn't get a chance, but maybe not. And what's going on with him? You obviously get a lot of stuff with Raffaello and his relationship to Kayana, and then this weird thing where she's like, I'm going to put Olivia around him and see what happens, and then nothing happens and all that. So I think there's stuff going on. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but I don't think it's enough. I think it's set piecey.
I can see my way to a 3, and I'm going, like, my gut is a 2.
Okay.
But I did skim the second half. So maybe that's not fair. I think I can give it a 3 because, in fairness to the author, they are capable of developing a good character. I think I honestly think the male lead is more well developed than Kayana. I feel like I understand him more than I understand Kayana. He doesn't have there aren't as many details about him that I know, but I feel like I understand his personality. I understand his motivations, what he wants.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
I don't really understand that about Kayana. And I think that's what I keep coming back to, is the big glaring issue is Kayana.
As your main character, you sort of need to connect with her, and not in a, oh, I can see myself being her kind of way.
Well, it seemed to me like I said, or like you said, even the self-insert,
Yeah.
maybe the author simply sees themselves as Kayana and therefore didn't feel the need to make others understand Kayana, because you would just intrinsically get what she's about.
You know what's interesting I just thought of is, because Isekai as a whole is very filled with self-inserts. Like, it's a escapist power fantasy. Like, that's sort of the point.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what this might be missing with Kayana is, like, she might be too developed to be a self-insert, but then not developed enough to be her own character. Because, like, I almost feel like she's not generic enough to be a self-insert.
This is going to sound weird, maybe, but I think writers will get what I'm talking about. I get a vibe from this that I get a vibe from some books where it's kind of like the author is playing solo D&D.
Yeah.
They're the DM and the player. They're throwing challenges at themselves and solving it as the protagonist.
Yeah.
and that they're not really thinking about the protagonist as a human being whose story they're trying to tell. They're thinking about the protagonist as like a player character. And that's...
What am I going to do? I keep getting kidnapped. Oh, I can get some magic, and then that will... I'll be able to protect myself.
Or I could choose to just play this situation differently than I normally do. Let me roll a charisma check to seduce my abusive brother. Like that. I keep coming back to that. It's the easiest thing to pick on. Mm-hmm. But it's also like the earliest point that I was a little turned off. But yeah, let me move on.
All right. Well, now we're going to get into where this is just going to pick up lots of points, and it's not going to be really fair to how much we've been ragging on the story so far. Our competency. I apologize. I have to give this a 5.
I'm going a 4. I'm interested to know why a 5.
I mean, this is we've seen this with a couple other series so far where it's just like they are doing the art so well that you can literally pick out any scene in any chapter and go, hey, look how beautiful this is. To like just a random person walking by. You can be like, hey, is this beautiful? Oh my God, that's amazing. What is this? And it's like, you don't want to read this probably. It's top end on the art scale. Like
I do think it's top end.
If you're assembling a list of the very best looking manhwa, this is going to be on it.
I'm thinking, should I reevaluate my 4?
I don't think a 4 is necessarily wrong. I think out of the ones that I've given a 5 to so far, this is the lowest, but it doesn't fall out of the 5 for me at least because of the fact that like I can't remember, and again, I'm not really into the art, so, but like out of everything that I remember about this series, there was never a point where anything about the art stuck out to me as like, oh, that looks weird, or I wonder why they made that choice, you know?
Is Castle Nim a bonus for you?
Not normally, no.
Because it's in here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's in everyone. Like,
well, yeah, but no, but I'm getting to the point where I recognize it now.
If I knocked off points for asset
reuse, yeah.
that I recognize, like everything would get a 1.
No, I think it's good. This is a strange one because until I read Otome Isekai, I really didn't care much about fashion choices in comics. Like, I think JoJo is ridiculous when it comes to the fashion. Come at me, I don't care. But this made me... I like the shoes. It's so weird. Like, the things they focus in on is the... there's this weird look I never liked until I started reading Otome Isekai. And it is the male fashion of like ankle length pants that expose just a little of ankle with
and
a
then
low
no
shoe.
Socks on your
and then no socks or very low socks.
Loafers. Yeah.
Yeah. And somehow this is just making it look sexy. And it's the shoes. They really patterned the shoes. But yeah, all the clothing looked really good. That is something I actually appreciate a lot in Otome Isekai.
Maybe you're jealous of that style because you couldn't wear that because if you
I can't
tried,
pull that off.
It would look like there's carpet sticking out of the bottom of your pants.
I am a very hairy man. And where is that in Otome Isekai? You know what? You want to get a 5 from me? That's real easy. You throw a big bear man in there.
There is never any body hair. The guy can be the shaggiest, have the shaggiest head of hair and a long beard and everything, and he'll have no body hair at all. And it's like,
come on.
That's not how that works.
Okay, so I gotta write Notome Isekai.
People be like, it's Bigfoot.
He has like 2 chest hairs. Get this beast out of my court.
Well, for artistic flourish, I'm going to go with a 4. So I'm going to go down a little bit here. And the main thing with this is that I don't think they did quite enough with sort of like scene setup. They obviously were thinking about it some, but they didn't go quite far enough to give that sort of like that experience that you get from some manhwa where you're like scrolling through it and going, oh, look how this flows through here and everything. And while they do a lot of flourish and there's a lot of the kind of like borders, flower borders and shalalas and, you know, all the like stuff that gets laid over top. I felt that like in a lot of places it was sort of just like, oh, this is what we have to do, and not really connecting to the scene and everything and going like, what makes sense here and like how would a camera flow across this and those kind of things.
Yeah, it's more than the bare minimum, but it doesn't rise to the level of excellence. Like, and this is kind of where I was thinking like a 4 for the art competency as well. It's not that the art is incompetent, but there are some choices where the pose or the angle was chosen for the convenience of reusing an asset.
Mm.
And it didn't fit as well. Like, I could tell there were a lot of places where there wasn't as much custom art as we have seen from some other series, where they would, if they could not find something to reuse, they would draw it rather than sacrifice the flow of the scene.
Right.
And this one, I don't think always does that. And I don't mean to say by that I could do any better, especially given the time constraints I'm sure these people work under. But it's, I noticed it, and I'm, as always, if this is the first episode of Heroine Addiction you've ever listened to, I'm stingy with my 5s. I don't like to give a lot of them. So I consider a 4 to be very good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, giving something a 5 is like, it's above and beyond. I guess we'll move on to personal preference.
It's toughy.
I've actually evolved on this one, because if you had asked me my personal preference on this, like in the middle of season 2 as it was coming out, I probably would have said a 4. After I've been waiting on it for a while and, you know, revisiting it to record this episode, I'm going to go with a 3. I enjoy this quite a lot. As far as like when it's coming out, I'm going to read it as soon as it comes out. I'm interested in what's going on, but I'm not really that invested. And as far as like waiting for season 3 to come out, there really hasn't been a point where I was like, oh, where is this? I really need to know what's happening. I really need it to come back. And
Kermit, if you're listening, we got him. We got him. He's starting to not enjoy.
The whole, like, looking forward to the next chapter coming out thing is a big part of it for me. If I'm not so into it that I'm thinking about it when I'm not reading it, like, that's the thing that's going to elevate the personal preference for me. So if I had to guess for you, 1?
No, not that bad.
Oh, okay.
2. So I dislike it. I can understand its appeal to others. Like,
let's hold on a second. What does it say? Oh, okay. Personal preference for 1 is absolutely hated it. All right, that's fine. Yeah. 2 is dislike it, but can understand its appeal to others.
I get why people would like it. I get why you like it. I don't think it. For me to give something a 1, I basically have to be leaning towards this is just almost harmful to read. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, for example, I would say if this was like really indulging in some kind of like dark abuse fantasy, it'd be a 1. Like there are things where I just don't value them at all. I think this has value.
I don't know. I think a dark abuse fantasy can
It
potentially
depends.
be good.
Depends what the context is. Is it approving or disapproving? I have read stories where it is uncritical of that and perhaps celebratory of it, and I'm not into it. But with this, I don't think it crosses any lines. I don't think it's particularly horrible. I don't think the messaging's bad. I don't even really think the writing's bad. It's just samey and derivative, and it doesn't do much to give me a reason to read it over anything else. There's so much good stuff out there, I think, and that could be the problem, is in a vacuum, it's not that bad.
This is bad because other things exist.
Well, in a vacuum, this isn't that bad. On Bato, this is not what I'd pick. There's so much stuff.
I don't know that it's fair to say bad. Like, it's not bad. It's just not good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I don't think the author, like, I think I'd give the author another chance for sure. It's not so bad that I'm like,
don't give him another chance on that other series. Like,
maybe the next one. If somebody were to come to me and say, hey, I know you didn't like this, but this one's really good, I'd give it a shot. Mm-hmm. It's not so bad that I'm burned on the whole thing.
They're close enough that you can see how they would be able to improve easily.
Yeah.
Well, recommendation strength. So, yeah, I guess I'm giving this a 3.
Yeah, I thought about it. I'd give it a 3 because I'm looking at our definition for a 2, and a 2 is recommend to a very niche audience who wouldn't care about significant issues. In this case, I don't think I would ever recommend it to anybody outside of the Otome Isekai community.
Yeah, certainly.
Like, this is not going to bring you in. But if you're already in and maybe you just want something with good art to, like, read in between other things, I could see it.
Yeah, it's definitely got the vibe of, like, hey, you read all the other good stuff. Here you go.
I wouldn't kick it out of the magazine, but I'd rank it pretty low.
Well, if we were doing this on Shonen Jumping the Gun, I'd probably give it a pretty high praise, because at the very beginning, at the first chapter, I was like, hey, this, I can see where this is going. This looks pretty good.
That's an interesting thing. Across genre comparison. If this were in Shonen Jump, I think it would probably be in my top 5. I am not as enamored with Shonen Jump as you guys are, but
I don't know if I would say enamored with it, but I don't know. I like stuff in general. It's an interest. We're working on issues. All right. Well, I think it's time to tally this score up and see where we lie.
Oh, golly. Gonna have to use the calculators. Too many categories. Too many categories too early in the morning.
All right. Well, looks like I ended up at 68.
I ended up at 58.
Well, that's a pretty good spread. That's pretty fair to what I expected. And rating this, it looks like I'm going to give this a solid 7, which, to be fair, is probably what I would have picked without the rubric, honestly. So I think that works out pretty well.
Yeah, it's solid 6 for me. So,
And again, just as a reminder, basically 5 and up means it was fine, at least.
yeah, I'd say there's a difference between things that are. Incompetent sounds mean, but things where it's like, I'm talking about there's just objectively bad. Like, the proportions of the figures are off in a way that you didn't intend. Like the writing literally contradicts itself. Stuff like that, where there's just mistakes all throughout it. This is not that. It is very professional. It is.
Oh, and that definitely exists.
Yeah.
We have not covered those series, and that's for a good reason.
Yeah. So this is obviously like it is a professional quality work. It is, above par. It's just, it ain't my thing, and I think there's better.
Well, we're certainly, we've done this enough times now where you've built up enough series that I think having opinions like, hey, this seems very samey, I think that's pretty valid. So
If you want to yell at me in the Discord, I'm very receptive to criticism.
I think what people should do is go out on our website and do the rubric for themselves, and then come to the Discord, and you can put your score up there on the Discord, and we can talk about it, and we can figure out where the differences lie, why we think there's a difference in our scores.
Let us achieve a mathematically precise rating.
And as I mentioned at the beginning, you can go out on our website. There's a page with our social links on there, and you can find a link to the Discord there, so come join us. Well, with that, I think it's time to pick the next series. And as we've been doing for a little while now, we are going to give our patrons the choice. So we're going to pick 3 series, and then there will be a poll up on the Patreon that will be up for a week, and you can go on there and vote. Last time we had a 2-way tie, and so we let the Discord be the tiebreaker. So you should join our Patreon, and you should join the Discord if you really want to pick which series we cover. So Beatrice has been hanging on. It was one of the tiebreakers last time. So do we want to leave that on there?
Sure. I mean, if people are passionate about it, yeah.
It's got to get picked eventually, right? So as I was looking over these recommendations, we did get a couple recommendations for older series, which we had asked people to give us last time. The recommendations I have here are old manga, old shoujo manga. Let us know in the Discord, or you can comment on the website or whatever, or any of the social media. Do you want us to cover manga, or should we stick with manhwa? So far we've only done newer-ish manhwa, but I'm interested in getting into some of the older stuff. I'm sure Ben is too, right?
Yeah, I don't mind. I
mean, let us know.
I'm kind of like, I don't know. Yeah, Heroine Addiction can evolve a bit. I don't know. So far, it's been pretty much just Otome Isekai, too.
Yeah. So that said, I do have one that is not a manga here that we did get a recommendation for, and that is Another Typical Fantasy Romance, which the title doesn't give me all kinds of good feelings, but it is very highly rated, and I have heard some good things about it. So I think we will have that and Beatrice on the poll. So we just need to find one more.
What's a weird one?
Oh, what's a weird one? I mean, they're all weird in their own ways, right? If I was going to make a recommendation, I would say we should probably do Who Made Me a Princess. It's a completed series. It's been completed for, probably a year now. And there's actually an anime coming out of it.
Oh, do it.
It's not necessarily that weird, but it's got some weird parts in there. So, all right, so that'll do it. Beatrice, Another Typical Fantasy Romance, and Who Made Me a Princess. I have a feeling that this is going to be a pretty controversial poll.
Uh-huh.
So we'll see. We'll see where we end up. This might be the one that knocks Beatrice off the poll for a while.
Oh, man.
Once again, you can go on our Patreon to vote. And if you don't want to join the Patreon, that's fine. If there's a tie between two of them, the poll will go up on the Discord. And so you can join the Discord without being a Patreon. Although, if you become a patron and go and join the Discord, you do get some extra perks from that on the Discord. So check that out. Well, that'll do it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Before we go, we want to thank Sugoi Mart for partnering with us. Sugoi Mart's a retailer of Japanese snacks, drinks, toys, and merch. And there's a lot of cool stuff that they have that you can't get outside of Japan. You can check the link in the description or use code APR15 at checkout to get 15% off your first order, which also helps us out. As I mentioned, you can let us know what you think on social media. We'd love to hear from you. And as you can see, you can tell us if you have a series that you want us to cover. You can check out our website, animepodcasterreincarnation.com, where you can leave comments on these specific episodes, and you can also find other posts and reviews. That said, there haven't been very many reviews up there recently, so we've got our Discord where you can chat with us, and we've got the Patreon. Supporters get perks like getting to vote on the series, which I just mentioned, as well as getting the high-quality stereo version of the podcast early. And we'd love to hear what perks you'd like. We have got a lot of patrons in a short amount of time, but we've got to give them shout-outs. So, first shout-out goes to Rainbow Jello, also known as Moon, our good friend Moon. Moon is a moderator over on the r/Otome Isekai subreddit, which you can also find just by going to otomeisekai.com. Got to shout out Rena, who is one of our favorite fans, if not our favorite fan. Rena comments all the time on the website and the Discord, and we are very grateful to Rena for talking to us. Next, we got Cake Dwarf. Cake Dwarf, recent Patreon subscriber and joiner on the Discord. We've been having fun talking to Cake Dwarf on the Discord, so shout out. And last but certainly not least, we have Kill Hour. Kill Hour comes to us from the Words About Books fandom first, but Kill Hour has been very active on the Discord, and we appreciate that. And we like all of the discussions that are coming about because of that. And be sure to check out our regular podcast, That Time I Got Reincarnated in the Same World as an Anime Podcaster. And if you can't get enough about Ben talking about things, you can check out his other podcast, Words About Books. Ben, I heard you have an extra plug today.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I also guested with my co-host from Words About Books on Unsighted, the internet's least reliable English lit podcast. You should check them out. They cover actual English literature as opposed to what we usually cover, which is like, Goosebumps and Jeff the Killer. And we were talking about Edgar Allan Poe and The Telltale Heart.
Well, once again, thanks for listening. We hope you had a good time. Now, if you'll excuse me, this bottle of manhwa has a child-proof cap on it that's giving me trouble. Cayena Hill. Yeah. That's the only name. Cayena, right? Is that how you're saying it?
Yeah, Cayena, I don't know.
I'm going to go with Cayena. Which is not as ridiculous as Raffaello.
Yeah. I have no idea what like culture or ethnicity they're going for, so I said like Raffaello or something. Raffaello. Is it French? Is it Italian?
I was thinking Raphael, like that's a normal name, so Raffaello would be like the normal thing. I can see where you would get Raffaello, but that sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, I have no idea where anybody's supposed to be from. This is a Castle Nim, not a Castle Neuschwanstein or whatever.
I was listening to that Jeff the Killer episode, and when it went into the whole like prequel origin story thing, I was just like, this is just like a revenge story. Like, I don't understand how this is like the prequel to like a sociopathic killer thing, right?
Yeah, there was. I didn't really get a chance to talk about like the versions of Jeff the Killer, but like the one I told was like the creepypasta, the one that got posted everywhere.
Yeah.
But apparently there's like a lot of discrepancy over who wrote the original, and you could kind of tell that there's like two authors at least, because like it said the first one was supposed to stop after he killed his family, or no, stop before he killed his family.
Well, and that was the thing is like, if you stop there, it's not a creepypasta. It's just a revenge story. Like,
yeah.
And then like the whole part after that where it was like, oh, and then he killed his family was very much, it felt tacked on. Like you said, it's just like, we have to add this or it doesn't make any sense that he became a sociopathic killer.
Well, you can almost tell the difference because like the first person like didn't know the word for bandages, and the second person does. Like the spelling improves. You can tell it was written by somebody who spoke English better.
I definitely got the feeling that it was, a teenager, not a foreigner.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why. But I don't know. On the Chan boards, like, you speak English or you speak Japanese, so there might be an incentive for a foreign teenager to write in English if they're trying to appeal to that audience.
Yeah, but it didn't, like, the cadence and structure and stuff didn't strike me as like, oh, this is an ESL person.
Yeah, they're talking like a kid in America. Yeah.
And it does that thing that kids do when they're telling a story where they know something but they don't say it and just sort of assume that it's that thing where you don't know that other people don't know what you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's not like my favorite creepypasta, but it's the one I felt like starting with just to see what the reception was.